Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. First item on the agenda is a 45th special session. Could I get a motion to go into special session, please?
So moved.
Second.
All right, looks like it was moved by Austin, second by Lou. Discussion, all in favor? Okay, 5-0, sounded like to me. All right, first item is introduction of an ordinance modification of building permit fee structure.
Mr. Mayor, who move for the mayor and city council to introduce an ordinance to amend chapter 64, building construction, and chapter 98, fire prevention of the city code to modify the fee structure for building permits. The modification would increase the formula by $1 per thousand for building permits valued over $10,000 to $105, plus $6 per thousand for new residential and commercial permits, and $105 plus $450 per thousand for miscellaneous residential permits, and would increase the percent of permit and allocate it to the fire marshal's office from 25% to 30%. The last increase to these fees was made in 2004. This proposed modification to the fire structure was included in the adopted FY19 budget.
Second.
To the modification to the fee structure, but
Did we discuss this?
Yeah,
I'm not, I do not recollect this
I
at
don't
all.
remember going over this during the budget, proceedings.
I thought we did, but I know we didn't get into a lot of detail. Michelle back there, I know that we talked, I think briefly, that we did raise some fees that were in the fee schedule, when we pointed out the fee schedule in the budget book.
Address the specific items, and so when I was going back to the budget book, this is one of the things, even in the book, there's a rate fee schedule, but certain things still, even after the adoption.
I think it's section 10.
Have to be passed for resolution and ordinance.
Yeah, so any change there.
My
Some can be
concern
done
is-
administratively, but yeah,
Yeah,
so
that's-
that money is included in your budget.
I know it's built into the FY19 budget, but I'm concerned about this as I was about the property tax increase, that we're coming out of the blue at the last minute kind of to our residents with this, and we haven't really discussed it in public. And I think, you know, we've already had a little bit of a backlash from people because of the property tax increase, and now we're raising something else without any warning or any offer to have a public meeting and come in and present your case on this, and what's it gonna do to your business if you're in the business of getting building permits and all this kind of stuff.
I agree with Austin.
Well, having said that, I will tell you that it would be the first time we start having public meetings about raising fees.
Yeah.
Permit fees, application fees, fire marshal fees. I mean, if every time we want to raise a fee, we want to have a public hearing to determine whether it's a good idea or not, is going to be a disaster. And I would note that, for what it's worth, the budget book is not a secret. It is online, it's accessible to everybody about what's going on, and there were certainly discussions about raising fees, whether I have specific recollection of discussing this particular fee and this particular amount, I can't tell you that I do.
No, I don't think we did do that, but we did talk about the fee
But we
schedule,
talked
and we
about
said that
fee
some,
structures
and when
and fee
Michelle went over
schedules.
revenue, she talked about, there's an increase, and you could see the increase from your prior year budget to where we increased building permit fees. I mean, it was very clear in the budget book that
Right.
we did that.
I saw that, yeah,
Yeah.
so I went back and looked after
Yeah.
I read this, and it was in there, but it just, it was one of those things that I think, it was a page in the middle of a thing this big that didn't really jump out.
I feel like we should be encouraging building and not discouraging or making it more
think-
expensive.
I think it's hard enough to get developers and friendly conversation about the permitting rather than raising the fee
Well,
structure.
Here's the reality.
Right. If you don't do it.
We have employees that we pay to review this information as part of the building and development process. And we're paying them to review and certify that these things are of an approvable nature before they get constructed. And So we either lump that into the general fund tax supported section, i.e. your general fund taxes, or you have to have a fee to the consumer for that specific review service. And, I mean, those are only two choices, or we just not have the employee, don't do the reviews, and hope that, you know, the person building it builds it to the specifications that we require. Obviously, none of us want to go that direction, and it really then comes down to a question of whether you think every taxpayer should absorb that cost for that service, or whether you think that the entity requiring the need of that particular service pays for it directly.
Which is still the taxpayer on the residence that's paying for the permit.
But it's that specific person that
So
wants.
that gets
like,
extended
in other
though
words,
to the,
I know,
they're
but
still
when I
paying
want-
for
When I
it.
want a fence at my house, I should be required to come into the zoning office and apply for that permit so that the zoning administrator can review that permit for that item that I want at my house. The alternative to that is that you simply roll that cost into your general fund tax structure.
No argument there at all. I agree 100% with that, but I just wonder if it's been communicated that we need to increase fees.
Nope. And I'll go one step further because, you know, I remember, you know, 2001 when I took office and we were looking at about a 37-cent potential tax adjustment over the next 5-year period. You know, one of the things that I noted in, I think it's section 10 is the fee section in the budget, fees hadn't been raised or adjusted across the board, and it seemed forever. And, you know, there's a you know, like 10 or 15 pages of fees in that section of the book. And I said at that time, and I still believe it now, you know, any fee that hasn't been looked at in 3 years should be looked at automatically, because there's no way we can continue to make these adjustments in wages and benefits without looking at those fee structures associated with those, what I'll call, you know, service-driven items to be able to cover it.
I agree.
And so here we have one,
15
this fee hasn't been adjusted, in 15 years. And, you know,
14.
hasn't been touched. Well, no, it's FY '19.
That's good for us to know, but for the guy that's paying the fee,
Well, so the answer to that is also
Well, they
very
do
clear.
know, we're sitting here talking about it in a public session. We have a
Right.
public budget document.
Well,
but we
and,
didn't. And we're
Well-
talking about it now, that we're gonna pass it. We didn't talk about it in the budget session when we were.
Well, this is your introduction. You'll have time between the introduction and the approval as well.
Okay.
yeah, and I say, I mean, if you want to have a hearing about it, you can always have a hearing about it, but again, I suggest that, having hearings about raising fees is not necessarily the best idea.
Or it should be the whole fee structure.
Right.
How much did this add to the budget?
That's what I would like to know, what was the,
Michelle, was it 39?
Yes, approximately.
I think it was about $39,000, correct?
Austin has his budget booklet, if you can look
Of course it does.
Code administration and fire.
Yeah.
Yeah, because every one of
Code.
those little items has a number beside it that says this is the difference
Yeah.
that we expect to achieve next year.
And
I
again,
do have a
and I
question
do
about
agree,
the-
we didn't specifically talk, you know.
No, we didn't.
Building permit, we didn't, but we did, when we went over the revenues, and we said, you know, here's these increases. and-
Yeah, I'm just saying, in the interest of transparency to the citizens, that we ought to do that.
And actually, at one of the meetings, we specifically looked at section 3, just on that revenue sheet, I think maybe it would be page 9, that has, all of the fees, and I said this was where we could see in more detail, have them broken out.
Yeah, and I think we did notice some of the
Yeah.
increases
So we
there,
had
yeah.
a building permit fire increase 33.5%.
Yeah.
Building permits increased 84.3%.
Yep.
We spent time on that in one of the sessions.
Yes.
Can I, what was the building fire permit before? Was it 30% of the cost of the building permit application fee? I mean, it wasn't 30 because
It was
it's
25, I think.
25. Okay. And that,
Oh, Kathy,
these fees are to help offset the cost of personnel and
Yes, because,
Right, our-
Wage
our
increases
costs-
and benefits,
Our
right?
costs have not been static for the last 15 years, and the intent of this increase was to be able to divert more revenue to the fire marshal's office.
I'm trying to defend you, Kathy. I'm not trying
Thank
to
you.
argue, okay?
yeah, and we kind of pride ourselves on code inspections department, that it is almost a self-sufficient department, where of course a lot of your other general fund departments are not, because we're supported by tax dollars, as Councilman Ashar was saying.
And I think it's important to note here, if you didn't have that particular entity within the city structure to submit that plan of review to, where would that plan go to be reviewed in that development review application process?
If we didn't have,
If you didn't have the state fire, or, yeah, if you didn't have the city fire marshal to review the document.
oh, it would
for
be
those.
like the county process, yeah.
The state
It
fire
would go to
marshal
the
would have to
state
do
fire
it.
marshal, which has.
The one state fire marshal
Right.
for 4 counties would have to do it.
And so, when you talk about those things in the context of money, yeah, and that permit applicant gets a review by city level in a time frame that is certainly
You would
much-
hope would
much
be
more
faster,
expedient
right,
than
yeah.
going to the state fire marshal's office.
Again, I have no, I don't disagree with that one bit. I think we've got a great system here, and we've got people who can, we've got our fire marshal to review, we've got our codes people to review everything. I'm just saying that, yes, it becomes necessary year after year. My vendors raise my prices every year. I know I'm gonna get a aircraft paint price increase. I just build it into my calculations. I know it's coming. Just to say that, we've sat here for 15 years or whatever, and we haven't raised the fee without letting people know that, hey, this is coming out of the blue. That's not out of the blue, it's coming, and we've got to increase fees because of contractual wage increases for whatever our expenses are as a city. Just keep people informed of what is happening.
Well, I can guarantee you, they're more informed right now than they've ever been.
Well, I know, but I'm just saying we can do a better job.
And when it was our goal to try to figure out a way to increase revenue for the fire marshal, we were very cognizant of what's the impact going to be on the tiny projects, which is why we didn't propose an increase for the amount per thousand for things that are the small jobs, less than $10,000 value. It's just for the larger projects.
All in favor for introduction of an ordinance?
Aye.
Aye.
So we got 3 for the introduction. Thank you. Motion carries. Resolution authorizing entering into a grant agreement with the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development for the urban improvement projects Plaza.
Mayor, I hereby move that the mayor and city council approve the attached resolution to authorize entering into the attached grant agreement with the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development for a fiscal year 18 strategic demolition fund award of $300,000 for the urban improvement projects Plaza. These funds will be used to help fund the cost to underground the utilities in the alley behind the Maryland Theater.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Approval of IAFF Local 1605 labor contract.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move for mayor and council approval of a collective bargaining agreement between the City of Hagerstown and International Association of Firefighters, Local 1605. This agreement shall run for a period of 4 years commencing on July 1, 2018 through June 30, 2022.
Second.
Discussion?
I just note one item, certainly I will be voting in favor this evening, but I am opposed to the specific provision of the specific time associated with the wage reopener.
Specific time.
Of 2022?
I believe it's 2020. No.
Oh.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Approval of non-union salary step adjustment for July 2, 2018.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move for approval of a one-step adjustment from the step currently maintained as of June 30th, 2018 for all regular full-time, non-union employees who are eligible for a step increase. Beginning July 1, 2019, all full-time, non-union employees will advance a step annually on their anniversary dates as the budget allows. An employee must have held full-time status for 6 full months. An employee must be full-time status on any non-union munis pay scale.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Approval of an addition of step 14 to non-union pay scale for July 2, 2018.
Mr. Mayor, hereby move for approval of the expansion of the non-union pay scale from a 13-step pay scale to a 14-step pay scale. Employee must have held full-time status for 6 full months. Employee must be full-time status on any non-union munis pay scale.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much. Leave the special session and move on to the work session on the agenda. Next up is the,
There was one more item on the special session. The grant agreement for the plaza.
we did that.
We did that.
Oh, you did that
Were you
already?
asleep during that?
I might have been.
Okay, all right.
And that was the second one.
Next up on the work session is a preliminary agenda review. The invocation will be given by me next week. We'll do the pledge of the flag. We'll have announcements, meeting schedules for July. There is no meeting on July the 3rd. July 10th, 17th, and 24th are all work sessions at 4 p.m., and the 31st is a regular session at 7 p.m. We'll have some appointments, Bicycle Advisory Committee and the Planning Commission. We'll have citizen comments, city administrator comments, mayor and council comments. We'll adopt the minutes of April 17th, May 1st, May 15th, May 22nd, and May 29th. As always, stop me if you need to. On the consent agenda, we are taking off the consent agenda the pole building. It'll be put back on at a further date. Next up under fire is triple combination attack pumper, 4-guy stainless tank and equipment, Myersdale, PA, for $499,173.
And what's that replacing again? Which engine?
Sorry?
What engine is that replacing?
Reserve engine 4.
Thank you.
Under Parks and Engineering, Langdon Street widening, Concrete Cento LLC, Hagerstown, Maryland, $66,685. Reconstruction of alleys, Concrete Central LLC, Hagerstown, Maryland, $269,587. Under Police, compact outdoor cameras, Skyline from Glen Burnie, Maryland, for $36,261. These cameras will be placed along Washington and Franklin Streets, correct, Chief?
Yes.
Under Utilities, electric, tree trimming services contract with Pittman Tree and Landscape, Inc. from Front Royal, Virginia, for $188,000. Under Electric, distribution transformers, National Transformer Sales, Raleigh, North Carolina, $54,791. Under wastewater, Fairbanks Morse Propeller Turbine Pump, AR&E Incorporated, Hagerstown, Maryland, $65,950. Under wastewater, replacement installation of SCADA system for collections, Avista Real-Time Systems, $39,778. Underwater, large meters, Core and Main, Martinsburg, West Virginia, $212,286.40. Under unfinished business, approval of an ordinance to increase in building permit fee rates for fiscal year 19. Sure we'll have a lively discussion again next week. Under new business, introduction of an ordinance, quitclaim of Kensington Commercial Center on Eastern Boulevard. The approval of a resolution for the fiscal year 2019 Community Development Block Grant Annual Action Plan. The approval of a resolution supplemental 2015B reallocation of bond. The approval of a resolution revising parking facilities rates and fees. The approval of resolution, grant agreements for urban improvement project and subrecipient agreements with BOE and Maryland Theater. The approval of resolution, lease agreement with Valley Art Association. The approval of resolution, WLR Student Housing Agreement, 140 West Antietam Street. The approval of resolution, WLR Financial Incentive Agreement, 140 West Antietam Street. The approval of city funding support for the Maryland Theater expansion, general fundraising support. The approval of city funding support for the Washington County Museum of Fine Arts HVAC project. The approval of city funding support for Brooks House, one-time general fund agency contribution. The approval of fiscal 2019 workers' compensation self-insurance. The approval of an agreement and acceptance of EV charging stations, which we'll discuss this evening. The approval of an agreement for urban improvement project. The approval of the sale of a 2004 Chevrolet Tahoe to the Antietam Fire Company. The approval of a grant agreements with the National Crime Statistics Exchange, Domestic Violence Unit Program, and the Federal Body Armor Vest. Are there any questions on the consent agenda and the agenda for next week? Okay. All righty, moving on. The installation of EV charging stations.
Good afternoon. We were, Public Works was recently approached by a company called EVI, Electric Vehicle Institute, wanted to expand or install electric vehicle charging stations. The call was kind of out of the blue, something that we've talked about and thought about as a city or as an organization, Public Works and Parking, for some time. But the cost, Roy, is pretty prohibitive installing them. We just didn't feel they would be used that often, and the cost to install them would be pretty high. EVI, what they are presenting to us is a grant that would cost the city $0 to install 4 charging units in the city downtown. They've looked at other places such as the Premium Outlets, which have charging stations, the Valley Mall, which has charging stations, and this would place charging stations in the downtown along, we'll say, the Route 40 core. And what they're trying to do is, their goal is to set up the infrastructure to support electric vehicles so that you don't have range anxiety, which is worrying about where you can charge your vehicle. So we've been working with City Light to try and find an appropriate place, because you have to have a certain amount of power, a certain infrastructure to be put in place. And what we looked at doing, and what we're proposing to do, is install them in the Elizabeth Hager parking lot. It's close to the CVB, it's close to the downtown businesses, it's easy to find, and it's relatively easy for City Light to make the installation for the transformers and that sort of thing. City Light would have some expenses, but EVI has agreed, or would agree, if this is all approved, to reimburse them for about $14,000 in cost. But in the end, as I said, it would cost the city $0, and we would have, as far as Public Works and Parking, no upfront cost. They would simply come in and do the work. So,
Great.
now, there's an option that we can charge for the electric. We don't plan to do that at first. We'd like to see how the use is, and the parking fund would absorb the electrical cost, which we're really guessing at this. We're expecting to be about $500 to $600 per month if they get used on a regular basis. We will put parking meters at the spaces, just so people don't park there and plan to charge their car all day. But the charging stations we're looking to put in are what they call fast charging. It's a level 3. So in, half hour, you can pretty much get enough of a charge in your vehicle, you can move on from there. So, no cost to us. It installs them in the central lot. It's a good location. To me, it seemed like a win-win situation there. Now, a couple of things that came up as we worked through it to consider is, one is the location. I gave you a kind of an overview or plan view, which is in the central lot. That area, of course, in the Urban Partners Plan is where potentially a building could be constructed. I talked to EVA about that, EVI, explained the situation, and they were still okay with the location. They basically said, that's fine, if it ever gets built, we'll just relocate them if you can find us another location. There are other places in the central lot that we could put them, but they seem kind of buried. You know, in other words, they're further east on the lot, might be hard to find. We want them someplace where you can actually find them. But as far as charging for the electric, if we decide to do that, there is an option. We can install credit card machines in the devices, but that would be under a separate agreement with EBI. And then we have to do some cost sharing and revenue sharing and that sort of thing. But we'd like to just do it for free for now, other than the parking, and there'd be parking meters there.
So when you pull in, you're charging your car, you gotta pay a parking meter.
Yeah,
fee.
you're not paying the electric, but you're paying the parking meter.
And we're doing that, and I feel like you're saying we're doing that to keep other cars out versus,
Well, not to keep them out necessarily, but to allow them, they can still use it. They can still use the parking space.
trying to
There's no
figure it out.
electric car there.
If there's no electric car there, we're not gonna lose spaces. We
So
can
what
But we're also,
happens-
right, it's so to keep people from just parking there all day and charging all day.
But even so, I mean, you say, if these spaces are taken up
Yeah.
by non-electric vehicles
Yes.
on a good bit of time,
Yeah.
it seems like it defeats the purpose of having them readily available. In other words, and I don't know how this works because I don't know electric vehicle, but when I go
Yeah.
to the outlets or when I go to the mall,
Yeah,
is that parking only for those vehicles?
that's my understanding.
I
But
guess
there's no
for me,
meters
I
there,
wouldn't
but-
do it, I wouldn't do it otherwise then.
Right. I mean, nothing more frustrating than driving an electric vehicle to find usually the charging station.
I just like,
somebody's
yeah,
not
somebody might
allowed to
come
park
down and be like,
there.
oh, I'm gonna go to the library, I'll just
Right.
park here, and then they go, wait a second, a regular car's here? This
Well, we
doesn't seem
could,
like
we
a-
could just limit it to the electric bill, that's fine. But we
That's
just
my-
didn't want
that's
them
my
to
opinion.
put the charger in and feel like they're parking downtown, because they're not gonna
You'll
get
still
charged for
put the
electric.
meter there,
They'll
just,
still put the meter there so they can,
The difference in the Valley Mall and the outlets is that the electric cars are like, they're in the most inconvenient
Yeah.
spots. So
That's
you're
true.
making it the most convenient.
trying to,
And I'm
yes,
fine with
So
the
it's like-
meter,
yeah,
I'm not fine with non-electric cars
Okay.
using
That's
those
easy enough.
spaces.
sure.
I think.
Even meter.
I think an alternative could be, the lot you're talking about,
Yeah,
to say X time parking for electric vehicles and/or the visitor center. We have, what, 2 spots for the visitor center right now?
yes.
And I mean, you have any concept how often they're used?
No, they're unmetered also, because
Right.
in our lease agreement, we have to provide them 2 parking spaces for free, for no.
Okay, I just wonder if we could,
Oh, we might be able to, but yeah, we can easily make it just for the electric
I'd
vehicles.
rather
That's
see
fine.
metered and 4 electric vehicles in it.
That's
Okay,
fine.
no problem. That's easy.
At first, because I just think
Yeah.
that if they come down,
I
I think
agree.
it will send a bad experience. They come down to go to the restaurant or whatever.
Sure.
And go, oh, well.
And it's new to us too, so we're kind of learning as we go too. We're still trying to, navigate the waters here a little
My
bit.
only comment is that, if we're gonna charge for parking and not electricity, that the parking rate should be higher for those 4 meters, because
No?
that's the only, thing
I'm all
that's
for that.
going to, no, that's the only thing that's gonna disincentivize somebody from just taking that and keeping it from an electric vehicle. The other thing is too, from the 4 positions where they're at on the map, I like the fact that they're up, they're convenient, they're visible and all that. The only comment is, that's taking 4 places away from a very busy parking area where people are going to the various departments in that area and everything during the day. And I don't think anybody is going to take a electric vehicle spot for a higher fee than they could get by going around the corner. I'm just wondering if we could move that, those main 2 rows when you pull into the parking lot
They're
there.
prime.
They're prime real estate for
Yeah.
parking during the day when you're going downtown for something and people go into all the, everything we have downtown. Maybe we could move it around just around the corner a little bit someplace, but.
When folks with electric cars, they like to walk, which is
Well-
why the other electric car spots are farther, I mean, that's, you know,
I
they do.
don't know that for sure, but,
Yeah, but
Well-
here's
Feels
to
like they
get you
do.
closest to
Sounds
your
like
utility.
profiling to me.
I'm
right,
not
exactly.
profiling.
See, this
In other words,
location
you
was
got cut
chosen
through that
because
parking
the,
lot, you're gonna be cutting up a lot of parking lot.
right.
What about over by Applause Catering?
Again, it's pretty far away from where we think people will find them. We're trying to make it easy to
I like that
find.
spot.
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah, because it's
And-
closest to your utility connection you gotta have to run the electric.
Right.
Well, if you're gonna
And
do
I'm saying-
that, put them up front by the visitor center so that.
Well,
you
again, the
can-
utilities aren't up there. Utility, the transformers for that building are actually at this location.
Right there, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
They
that
have to
makes
add
sense. Okay.
transformer.
I missed
And
that
also
part.
remember, right across the street is a deck of 440 spaces.
But
So
EVI
if
is
we
paying
do-
for it, so.
I like the idea of charging a little more on the parking meters for
I
that,
think so. You're gonna
That's
have
good.
to, you're gonna have.
for those spots at least.
Some road rage there when your EV owner comes in and somebody's parked there, you know, with their Honda Civic or something.
Well, we have enforcement too, so if they're, I mean, they could be an electric vehicle but not charging, right? I mean, they could literally say, you know, unless we put a sign that says you must be charging your
Well,
auto, you know.
the thing is,
but-
if you increase the parking rate for those spots, you either, you know, then you choose to pay more to park there, so
Okay.
be it, it's your spot. You know, whether
Okay.
you charge or not, doesn't matter,
All right.
I think.
The other thing in here was there's a letter of support that EVI is asking for. Next week, you would be voting on the resolution and the motion and all that, but there's at the end, there's a support letter they're asking from the city, which I could sign and send to them if you're okay with that. That way, they can get the state moving. What they do is they accept private and public funding, and they need the state to reallocate money to this project, and the letter of support would get that ball rolling. If you're okay with that, I can get that signed and sent out. And it's not official with as far as the resolution, at least helps them move things forward. But they like to move on this pretty quick. Once this is resolved, I'd see them in here in July actually trying to get the work done. They're anxious to get it built.
That's neat. It's a good opportunity.
Yeah, the only other question is,
Yes.
it says that it's covered by a 5-year repair and maintenance program.
Yes.
Providing all necessary maintenance by EVI.
Yep.
Does that include vandalism?
I'm not sure, I'd have to ask.
Because that could happen, definitely.
I mean, it's their units. We're not buying them from them. We're basically granting them space to put these things in. So I'd say if they get damaged, wherever, it's gonna be on them to make the repair, not on us. But I can find out for sure.
Yeah, because if we're not hooking up the credit card machine and they're not getting any direct revenue off of it, you know, what's their incentive to come in and?
Again, their main goal is to build the infrastructure. That's what they're really about, so. And it was another reason we didn't try to push them further down in the lot. They're not as visible, as we'll say. They're probably more prone to vandalism further down in the lot than they are here.
Okay.
So we're good? All right,
Thanks.
thank you.
All right, Ron, you're up. Urban Improvement Project update and utility contract.
Good afternoon. The urban improvement project is happening. Callis Contractors is working on the new Barbara Ingram School, and they started yesterday. So they're on-site working, and Morgan Keller is going to begin next week working on the Maryland Theater project. So it's really exciting, biggest investment in our downtown ever. And tonight I wanted to go over our part of that project with you. Specifically, I wanted to talk about utility work in the plaza area, show you some concepts of the proposed plaza, talk a little bit about the building at 4347 West Washington Street, just give you an overview of how traffic's going to be handled during all this construction over the next 2 years, and just briefly talk about the noise ordinance. So the first thing I wanted to go over was in the, as the project has evolved, the city has taken on the portion of the project that's known as the plaza, which is the area behind the Maryland Theater, and is shown in the picture up on the screen. So you can see that whole menagerie of utility wires that are behind the Maryland Theater in that general area. And our staff has worked to develop plans to take all those wires down and put them underground, the transformers and everything. We put that out to bid recently, and next week I'd like to ask you to approve a contract to Ellsworth Electric, who was a low bidder, for $460,000 and some change, to install the conduit system that is basically begins at the far right hand of the screen and goes the whole way to the county, actually goes the whole way to Washington Street. But that entire area then would be free of wires after this work is completed. Once we have the conduit system in the ground, then we have to pay the utility companies to come crash their wires and put them down into the conduit system. So that's another chunk of money. And so in your memo is the layout of the costs from all those different utilities, including City Light, Verizon, Antietam Cable, and others. So the funding then is laid out in the memo as well. 300,000 of it is in the grant that you just approved a few minutes ago. 655,000 is from reprogrammed bond funds, and we do have some contingency built into this because digging in that area back there is rife with potential problems. So we do have some contingencies built into what I'm going to ask you to approve next week. And that will complete then the first phase of the plaza construction. We think the work would start in July, be done by roughly October, and we're going to do all our work at night. The building contractors need this area for their, what they call their laydown or staging areas during the day. So they're going to work 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. They go home, and then we move in, and then we're going to work at night from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. That analogy about playing nice in the sandbox, I've heard it like 50 times in the last 2 weeks about all of us trying to use this space together. And so far, everybody's been communicating well, and we're off to a good start, I think. I'd like to show you some concepts of the plaza. So at the top of the page would be Washington Street to the, I guess I should get a microphone. So Washington Street's up here, Potomac Street, Maryland Theater, the county building, the Plum Restaurant's right here, the district court. This gives you an overview of the area of what's proposed. The cultural trail right now ends right here. So it would continue through this parking lot into the plaza area and then out to Washington Street. And then the plaza would be developed in the area there. Here's a more detailed view of it. The new Barbara Ingram School, the Maryland Theater, the Plum would be right here. So this area's got to get used in a lot of different ways. First thing is it's going to be the bus drop-off for Barbara Ingram School. So those buses will come in here, drop off, and the kids will walk over to the school. It's also got to be like the back of the house services for Barbara Ingram and the Maryland Theater. So when the Maryland Theater has a show, they have a tour bus and tractor trailers. They have to pull up to the building, and then they'll pull forward. And by contract, they can't be more within 100 feet from the building. So we're just going to store them in here during those shows. Garbage trucks and food services, because now the Barbara Ingram School will have a cafeteria. They all have to get to this building. So all that will use the plaza. We could have events back there if we choose to do that. We're showing a small stage area over here along the trail, and it could be used for several different things like that. This is kind of what it looks like from, like, say, the roof of the district court. This would be the district court parking lot, which they're likely to expand back to here. So that really kind of made the plaza scale down to the size that you see here. And then just some details that we'll be working on. Again, we haven't finished this design. Right now, I'm just trying to get feedback from certainly this body, but then all the stakeholders. Just some different things. It's probably going to be completely made out of concrete with either tinting or patterning, maybe some movable trees, but we really can't make a lot of green space because of the different uses that have to occur in here. So maybe we could have something like this, some lighting. Maybe these medallions would be used to direct traffic down the alley and to create that sense of a lane for traffic to go. All those details we have to work out. So that's basically the concept. So 4347 is owned by Hager 5, and they are in the process of removing it. They did have a piece of the roof cave in last week. That building's been in bad condition, as we all know, for a long time. So two things that, they are now working under the assumption that they're not going to replace that building. And we can talk about that if you'd like. But if they don't replace it, then what's the streetscape going to look like? And one option would be to possibly salvage the lower floor area, something like what this would look like. This is not it. This is actually, I think, in Lancaster or something. But this is saving a piece of that where the trail would come through at this area and just kind of recreate that building look. Or you could match what's directly across the street at the University Plaza, because when you come out of here, this is at the crosswalk over to the University Plaza. So if you have any feedback on what you think about either one of those options, that would be very helpful too. Then on the traffic control, I know you can't see this, but I'll just give you some general overview of what we're looking at. So here is Washington Street, here's Potomac, here's the square, here's Barbara Ingram, and here's the Maryland Theater. So the Maryland Theater is building out towards Potomac Street. They have no place to work. The footprint of the building is the property. So they need a place to work. So I think we've just come to the realization that we need to give them the right lane of traffic for them to set up their cranes and their construction vehicles and everything. So if we do that, the big complication then is what happens with the Barbara Ingram School, because they have so much traffic going in there in the morning and the evening with parent drop-off. So the proposed plan would be to give them the right lane in front of both of these buildings to work. Services to the restaurants and things in this area would be in the right lane beyond that work area. So like if a delivery truck was going to the Stube or 28 South, they would park in that right lane. When school starts in September, we're going to try to put the buses in here, short of the upstream here of the Barbara Ingram School, and let them pull in that right lane to drop off. And then the parents, we're going to move over to Washington Street, where they can drop the students off and then have them walk over to the school. It's not a perfect plan. We know there's going to be issues, but for right now, that's the plan that we've all kind of agreed to that we'll attempt to do. For the Plum, I've spent a lot of time with Sarah and discussing with her her concerns about the project. Right now, she gets a lot of her business from this direction, so there will be a walkway created that people can continue to walk past District Court. There will be a fenced, safety fence walkway along the building that you can still continue to walk around all this construction and get to her and other points to the north. Also, we're putting signs out on Washington Street that say Plum, direction to the Plum, so that that people know that she's open and it's visible to get to her. And I think she's very satisfied with the plan so far. So that, in a nutshell, is what's going to happen, and this work zone is going to get set up here in the next couple of weeks as they get ready to start tearing down those two buildings. And then the last thing would be the noise ordinance. Since we're working day and night and we need to get the work done on schedule, we would ask next week that you consider a waiver of the noise ordinance basically for the whole project. So that's all in a nutshell. So what comments would you like to offer?
I think that plaza is gonna be a real drawing point for other kind of events. I think we're gonna see that thing really grow into a festival area and everything else. My only comment is there anything we can do with the district court parking lot to expand the footprint of the plaza?
I have a meeting with the administrative judge, I think he's called, that from Annapolis. He's coming up to meet with me in a couple weeks to talk about what their plans are. Mm-hmm. That is what they want to do. They want to expand back. They need to add another courtroom, right? And they want to expand back. We've talked about ideas like expanding across the street towards the front, across Antietam Street. Talked about different things like that, but I have a feeling that's what they're going to want to do. But we'll talk to them about
And I would just note, is it as inconvenient as it's gonna be for a while on, South Potomac Street? I remember what everybody's thought process of what was gonna happen when we shut down Jonathan Street completely for an entire year, and we all got through it.
Yeah.
And, the end result is going to be amazing, and I don't know how you do a project of this nature without having these issues. And I compliment you on the theories of how to get traffic moving, and especially with the plum. And when you see the cultural trail there, you start really understanding some of the ultimate plans. It's gonna be a wonderful thing.
I think that, you know, a year or so ago, 2 years ago, when, you know, we sort of opened the cultural trail and folks were like, okay, well, what is this? You know, I don't think that it embodied the full breadth of the area that, you know, and linkages that we had envisioned when we sort of set that out. And one of the things is you know, that I've been a proponent of from the beginning is an actual open-air linkage to Washington Street. And so I'm not upset that that building is of the condition that they're considering removal, because I've always thought that that was the best course of action.
I believe so, too.
To link the areas together. Just as steadfastly on the south end of that, I continue to believe getting that property just beyond the, next to Park Circle.
Yeah.
You know, is just as critical to make that linkage from, you know, point north to point south.
I just sent you all an email on that about an hour ago, so.
Good. I haven't seen it yet. And the other thing I'll say is, I think to address some of Austin's question of, you know, the district court issue, I continue to picture in my mind, just as I pictured this sort of causeway through here, a parking deck here, left of that, much like, you see, I think there's 2 parking decks in Annapolis that remind me of sort of this, you know, spatial sizing and proximity to all those things that, you know, that folks want to park and get to, so.
Yeah.
you know,
I
We're in
agree.
dire need of that, and I would say, one, and if that plan takes place, there has got to be a way to access to the circuit court without having to walk around the block, around the Dagmar. When they closed that alley
Right.
and put that Sally Port in, it really changed a lot of things.
Great, sounds great, Ron.
Does anybody have any thoughts on this
Yes.
issue of,
I think it should match the park myself.
Oh, I
think
don't
that-
at all. I think
No?
it should be A. I think that picture on the top right is awesome.
For me, I think whatever the private owner deems as, you know, most economical to do so,
Okay.
as long as it creates that open. What they had before, that hallway with, you know, retail shops, I just,
This is much better.
yeah,
Yeah.
I wasn't.
there just really wasn't enough room to make that successful, I don't think.
One thing I would like to see, and I know it's a little bit outside of the scope, but you know, we've had one of these causeways in this block forever, and my kids love going through it, by the way, it's Hager Row, and I'd like to see a little bit better of how that's gonna link up at the end of the day, because I really think, you know, you can capitalize on what I see as some sort of like forgotten space that's been that way
Green space,
forever,
too.
that, you know, this opens the door of opportunity to that significantly once it's done.
Okay.
Great job.
So on this, whatever we work out with the
Yeah.
property owners, okay?
Open, yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's it, thank you.
Very good.
Thanks, sir.
Exciting stuff.
All right, approval of the fiscal year 2019 Community Development Block Grant Annual Action Plan.
Good afternoon. Each year, the city is required to pass a resolution to approve the annual action plan for our Community Development Block Grant Program, and this serves as our application for our annual entitlement through the CDBG program from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. In most years, we do this concurrently with approval of the budget in May, but because of HUD's late announcement of our grant funding this year, it was pushed to June, so that's why it's being done separately this year. After, I'd say, numerous years of flat or level funding, we're finally seeing a significant increase in funding for our block grant entitlement amount for fiscal year 19. From a bit of perspective, from roughly 1992 to 2010, the city would typically receive $1 million plus for the annual entitlement for our block grant program. Once we hit 2010, it dropped significantly, and we leveled out at around $650,000 per year. So some good news here on the block grant program for once, that we're seeing a significant increase to receive a grant this year of $757,000. With that increase, our action plan, we did adjust a few of the items in the action plan. After, once again, the award was announced by HUD, we looked to some of our public service agencies that have been receiving level funding essentially for those last 6 or 7 years, and we included a spreadsheet in the memo packet that shows a slight increase for all of our public service entities, and that includes the Community Free Clinic, Senior Living Alternatives, Children in Need, Community Action Council, Girls Incorporated Supper Program, and Together with Families, the Family Education Center Program. So we are proposing an increase of CDBG funding to all those public service entities that once again have been receiving level funding for about the last 6 or 7 years through the block grant program. With some of the other additional funding that we are realizing with that increase, we're looking at bumping up the demolition line item in the CDBG program for FY19, which is clearance of vacant blighted properties, and also some additional funding to some construction of sidewalk projects that would be handled through the engineering department. So once again, each year we're required to approve a resolution to serve as our application for block grant funding, and that's scheduled for next Tuesday's regular session. And if there's any questions on the block grant program, I'd be glad to answer those.
I have some questions on the funding, and maybe just a comment. When I look at it, first question is, this is my coming at this from a naive point of view, because the Mulberry Street traffic signal replacement, $300,000. My question was, what's the pressing need at that intersection? Because that's when you take the $300,000, that's like 40% of the grant. Is it what's so pressing about this intersection that we couldn't use that $300,000 for additional demolition of blighted properties?
I would say they're not really pressing issues, but it is the only signal on the Mulberry Street corridor that has the old-fashioned pole lights.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not out over the street. It has an unusual amount of accidents.
Okay.
And I think it's because the signals aren't out over the street like they are on mast arms and the other intersections. But is that pressing? I don't think it's pressing. I think it's up to you all if you want to.
I think one of the things we have to note about this is with large amounts of funding like that, with demolition, we can always look to possibly amend any leftover funding to increase the demolition line item during the middle of the year. But sometimes demolition type projects can take a significant amount of time to, I guess, mobilize. And this does help with our block grant standards when it comes to timely spending as well. So it's a balance of finding projects that are quick to move, but we're also willing to look at readjusting things if necessary, if we see that we would like to maybe shift some more funding to demolition if necessary.
And then also there's a $152,000 fee for basically administering the CDBG. Is that new employees, or what is that?
No, that's standard every year. The block grant program allows us to use up to, it's a cap number that looks at our entitlement amount or the grant amount for that particular year, and we combine that with what we anticipate to receive in program income, which we receive loan repayments back through the CDBG program. So we take 20% of that number, and that gives us what's known as the administrative cap, and that's for all administrative expenses, and it's nothing new, but it's typically funding a portion of most of our salaries. A lot of our block grant funded staff are part-time block grant and then part-time city general fund.
Okay. And then we have a new part-time code inspector.
Yes, and we've been, I think, for the last 3 to 4 years funding that through the block grant program.
Okay.
Anything else?
Nope.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll take a break for about 10 minutes before we start the last portion, which is the public discussion on proposed amendments to Chapter 197. Well, welcome back. The next segment of our work session is dedicated to the amendments to Chapter 197 of the City Code. We had a lot of individuals speak back on May 15th. We'll see if any are currently here.
You have some signed up, I think, again.
Yeah. Working off of the May 15th, we have, the very first person is, who would like to speak is Winslow Wheeler.
I guess I just missed it last time.
Yeah.
Good evening. Excuse me for the frog in my throat, it's allergy season. My name is Winslow Wheeler, I live on South Prospect Street. I vote, pay taxes, and live in Hagerstown. We live in a residential historic neighborhood that includes 151 individual rental units. Some of the landlords for those units cooperate with the city code requirements, and they contribute to the quality of life on our street. Some of the landlords in those rental units do not, namely by refusing to cooperate with the trash code, by ignoring historic district architectural requirements, and by ignoring tenants who have told us about real health and safety concerns inside their buildings. At the May 15 public hearing on this subject, every single speaker opposing the proposed rental licensing changes cited a constitutional right against unwanted city inspections, especially for inspections based simply on the passage of time, such as the 36-month interval that the city staff has proposed. Some of these speakers cited as support a decision by the Supreme Court in the 1960s. That case was Camara versus the Municipal Court of San Francisco, decided in June 1967 by a vote of 6-3. Speaking for the majority, Justice White made it extremely clear whether a city like Hagerstown is within its right to require periodic inspections based on the simple passage of time. Specifically, the court said, quote, having concluded that the area inspection is a reasonable search of private property within the meaning of the Fourth Amendment, it is obvious that probable cause to issue a warrant to inspect must exist if reasonable legislative or administrative standards for conducting an area inspection are satisfied with respect to a particular dwelling. Such standards, which will vary with the municipal program being enforced, with emphasis here, may be based on the passage of time, the nature of the building, or the condition of the entire area, but will not necessarily depend upon specific knowledge of the condition of the particular dwelling. The proposed changes in the rental licensing program here in Hagerstown clearly comply with the Supreme Court decision. The real question is not over a dubious assertion of constitutional prohibition, but whether some of the city's landlords simply want to avoid inspections, which, as we now know, have never occurred in 24% of the city's rental units. Our street, South Prospect Street, on our street, the city's new ordinance on trash and crime-free housing have resulted in some real but still unfinished progress. Eliminating the known loopholes of rental property inspection will give us some hope that we can further reduce the problems we see every day from the few remaining rental property owners who still thumb their noses at the city and at our neighborhood. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Winslow.
Joe Kraft.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Joe Kraft. I live in Kent Avenue with M&JK Properties. I'd like to thank you for providing an opportunity to speak and provide some insight into the issue regarding the rental inspection. I did not have an opportunity to speak at the last public session due to the time constraints, so I followed up with you via email, which I posed a few questions. I'd like to thank the members at the table before me that took the time to respond to the emails. Hopefully that offered some insight to the challenges all sides of the issue are facing. I'd like to go over some of the questions again so they become part of the record. It seems that the code office and council members kind of know who the problem landlords and management companies are, that haven't had an internal inspection for 10, 15, 20 years, and that continually ignore and circumvent the rules and regulations. With that being said, then one would have to ask the question, why does the Code Compliance Office continue to renew their license? Can anyone provide an answer or reason to continue to renew the license? Can the current ordinance be amended to allow for the Code of Office to pull the license of non-compliant landlords and management companies that fail to communicate and work with the office? However, keep in mind that some landlords will have very long-term tenants as their properties are well-maintained, managed, clean and safe, so please don't jump to the radical conclusion that everyone should be inspected because they haven't had a tenant turnover in 10 or 15, 20 years. Does the Code Compliance Office send out postcards or emails, reminders of when the interior inspection is due? We can all use some reminders. My doctor's office, they send me email reminders when I have an appointment, a doctor's appointment, pretty simple. If you send out reminders to the delinquent landowners, maybe it could be something like this. A review of our record shows that it has been X number of years since your last interior inspection. We would appreciate if you contact our office within the next 30 days so we can discuss the status of your units, work with us to schedule an interior inspection. That keeps the communication open. Is that something that the city administration and Code Compliance Office has considered or something similar? How about putting a notice in the paper of non-compliant landlords and management companies, similar to what's done with restaurant inspections? That should get some attention, but based on my current experience, my recent experience, I should say, I may myself end up on that list. And I won't make any friends with this proposal. I'll tell you that right now. And I'm not sure how the fee structure is going to help with benefit the health and safety of the community. Let me provide you an example of how the process is currently working. I currently have a vacant unit, and the interior inspection is due in August, so that's a month and a half away. Knowing this, I called the Code Compliance Office to schedule an interior inspection. What do you think the response was that I received? The lady informed me that the interior inspection was not due until August, and there was no reason to schedule it now. I mentioned to the lady that I'm aware of that, but the unit is currently vacant. In a few days, I might get a tenant that will stay there for 1, 3, 5, 10 years. That would be great if I'm lucky. Then what? Am I put on the nasty list as I am not cooperating with the Code Compliance Office, as is currently being discussed? The lady took my information. I am still waiting to hear back. The point is not to place blame, single anyone out, or point fingers. The point is to highlight some of the procedural issues in administering the current ordinance as discuss ways in which to improve the current system. So when we throw numbers around, what do the numbers really represent? How many landlords called in and did not get the inspection for whatever reason? Are they reflected in the numbers? Does the city administration have a good understanding of how the current ordinance is administered? Before imposing new ordinance, rules, regulations, take the time to learn how the current process works. What are the strengths, weaknesses, and what amendments can be made to improve the process? Is a 3-day turnaround time inspections the issue? If so, would a 5-business-day turnaround time be more reasonable? Did anyone approach the inspectors to determine if the time frame to conduct the inspections is unreasonable? Just by increasing the inspection time frame, you may not have to hire additional inspectors, spend additional taxpayer money, increase taxes, increase registration fees, but still assure the health and safety of the community. I won't make any friends with this proposal either, but it's better than the forced interior inspections. With that, I thank you.
Joe, let me ask you a question. So
Sure.
you're telling me that you had a vacant unit
Currently, right now, yes, sir.
currently right now,
Yes,
that's due for inspection as a interior inspection of every 4 years?
correct. It's
Yeah.
coming up in August.
Coming
Yes,
up in
sir.
August. But you have a vacant unit now,
It's vacant right now.
and you called to get an inspection so
Yes,
that
sir.
you could rent your unit, hopefully,
Correct.
and,
And still maintaining compliance.
right. Paul, is there any reason why we wouldn't have did the inspection while the unit was vacant?
Well, it all goes to the ordinance and stuff there. It's not required at that time or passed with mayor and council.
So is that one of those administrative things that we can look at and maybe work? And so now, when you look at it in 4 more years, and I have a tenant for 5 years in there, on 9 years total, without an inspection, you say, he's a delinquent landlord. That's all.
So I guess where I'm really confused at, and pardon me, I show my ignorance here, I'm sure. So if you were to get a tenant, say, July 1st, we would then, in August, go do an interior inspection of a rented property where the tenant is in the property?
No,
We wouldn't?
we would not do the inspection now until after, it's the first inspection after.
After the vacancy, when the
anniversary.
vacancy occurs?
So it's that first vacancy, so if Mr. Kraft was successful in getting a tenant for 10 years, we would not inspect it until that. tenant would
14,
leave.
so 14 years total?
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay,
But the
all
new
right.
proposal is going to.
No, I understand, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Rebecca Robinson? Rebecca Robinson?
Yeah, that's okay.
He's still going from that.
Yeah, well, I'm still going from the list, though. I
Want to
mean,
make sure there's.
Kathy Clemson, because I scratched off some that had signed up again.
Hi, good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Kathy Clemson. My husband and I own 2 rental properties in the city, and I'm a property manager and manage 6 other units in the city, as well as many others in Washington and Frederick counties. I too share many who spoke at the last meeting's concern about invading on our tenants' right to privacy by wanting to insist on an every 3-year inspection, even if occupied. I'm on the board of directors of the Washington County Landlord Property Owners Association, and we encourage all our many members, some of whom own many rental properties in the city, to be in compliance with all city, county, state, and federal laws. We are always keeping our members up to date on smoke and carbon monoxide alarm information, safety issues, fair housing, lead paint laws, etc. And we advise our members, among many other things, to inspect their properties often, no less than once a year. I know that I do, and I feel certain that most of the rental property owners in the city are in compliance with your rental license program and already keep their properties safe and in good condition. We already do interior and exterior inspections of our properties and take care of any safety or unhealthy living conditions promptly. Now the city wants to come in and inspect our tenants' homes as well. If you are a tenant, maybe some of you have been in the past or are now, I'm pretty sure most, if not all of you, would not be happy about the government wanting to invade on your privacy either. And I'm sure many homeowners would not want that either. The city's rental license program states it is designed to ensure safe, healthy housing opportunities for rental tenants, and it supports a higher quality of life for those residents and the surrounding neighborhood. If the city is really concerned about the surrounding neighborhood, as well as our tenants' safety and health, why is the city not concerned about owner-occupied properties as well? What about owner-occupied properties that possibly do not have working smoke carbon monoxide alarms, or that have possible electrical fire hazards or hoarding conditions that could endanger the surrounding neighborhood, causing fires to spread faster, or unsanitary conditions that might affect neighboring owners or tenants? Why do homeowners not have to be subject to the same safe and healthy inspections? Rental property owners are being discriminated against and requiring these inspections be performed only at rental properties. The city also now wants to add another $25 to the rental license fee to transfer the rental license to a new owner or agent name. Why is this fee necessary? Because it takes 5 extra minutes to update your records? It's just an additional way to impose more and more cost to the rental property owner, who will already suffer more burden, time spent, and cost if more frequent inspections are required. I know the city is already concerned about the many vacant and rundown properties in the city, and it should be. But in closing, I just want to reiterate the fact that there are many good compliant rental property owners in the city. Rather than doing what you can to burden us more and turn us and many other investors away from buying more city properties, and we will enhance those properties in the city, you should be doing what you can to keep us and focus on the non-compliant and problem rental property owners. If the negative amendments and changes the city wants to impose keep occurring to the rental property owner, the city will experience even more vacant and rundown properties, and equally as important, less tax revenue as well. Thank you for hearing my concerns.
Thank you. Robert Clemson? Okay. Richard Reynolds?
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for giving me a few minutes to express my concerns. I am Richard Reynolds. I live in Smithsburg, Maryland. I've been a landlord for 43 years, and many of those units have been in the city of Hagerstown. As a matter of fact, I've owned 21 units in those 43 years. I presently own 3 units. The reason I only own 3 units is because of all the excessive regulations, inspections, and fees the city puts upon me. I am suggesting that the council make no more regulations, but improve their record keeping and enforce the regulations that are presently on the books. I question the present record-keeping system. I am one of the delinquent landlords who did not pay their annual $75 per unit fee. The reason I didn't pay it was I didn't own the property. I sold the property in June of 2017. I received 7 failure to pay notices from November 2017 to February 2018. Nothing else happened other than I received those 7 notices. So how can you add more regulations if you don't figure out a way to enforce what we presently have and update your record keeping?
Thank you. Robert Reynolds? Okay. Sean Hart? Okay. Penny Nye?
Penny Nye, North Mulberry Street, Hagerstown, Maryland. The new code amendments are what is needed to keep our dwellings safe for renters and pleasing to the eye when riding or walking by these homes and buildings. As I have said before, these rentals are a business or businesses that give landlords a tax break. To have a good lease, in my way of thinking, would put the landlord in a good place to see what is going on with their own rental properties. It would also eliminate a cost of a property management people. Get to know your tenants. What were the reasons for investing in Hagerstown by buying a property or many properties? I wish I could say it was because you love Hagerstown and you wanted also to call this your home, but I believe otherwise because there are so few of landlords who live in our community. Home ownership is down by 39%, rentals up by 61%. Our budget shows how this percentage has hurt our tax base, and again, the homeowner does not get the write-offs. Are you, as council, listening to the facts and not to the arguments? And there were a lot of arguments the last time, but there were facts that Judy Willer had brought forward. Judy Willer at the last meeting gave you the facts. She came with typed and handwritten names of citizens saying yes to the code changes. Certainly more citizens saying yes than those landlords showing up with arguments. As you sitting council members know you have decisions that require you to make that may not be the best for one group, but overall the best for our community. Please think very hard about these code changes. Take a long ride through our community and look very closely to what you are looking at. Make a good choice for those who own and those who are renting. Our community has to stay pleasing to the eye, or we will continue to lose it altogether. And we are losing. We're losing the battle because we do not have the home ownership that we in fact need. And that is probably the biggest concern that I have. This is a community that I was born in, grew up in, and I would hate to see the demise of it. And certainly if you look at what is going on and you listen to what is arguments, and again, the landlords, it's a business. I would like to see more landlords live in our community, and then maybe it would be hands-on. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Michael Stanford.
Good evening, Michael Stanford. I live in Smithsburg, Maryland. Excuse me. I own and manage properties in the city of Hagerstown, in all places of Hagerstown, northeast, southwest, downtown. You know, we've heard of the same kinds of things, tenants' rights, and I'm in agreement with that. You know, I feel tenants should have the right to not have their home invaded, or not invaded, I'm sorry, to be entered without their permission. Under the ordinance, this ordinance is putting that back on the landlord, that if we go for a rental license, then we're automatically giving the city the right to go into our properties. But if we don't get the license, then we're not within the guidelines of the city, and they're going to fine us. So that's kind of a catch-22 there. The other things that we talk about, have been talking about for the last year or so, is the perception of doing business in the city of Hagerstown. So we had the rental registration changes. We've just recently updated and made more restrictive the nuisance abatement issue in Chapter 185. You have increased the property tax rate, and then on apartment buildings, you've increased that even more, which, as it was pointed out to me by a council member, that also increases the personal property tax for businesses in the city of Hagerstown. Permits and inspections, you're looking at increasing those fees. So that perception is not only still there, but it's growing. Current program, whether I agree with it or not, it's there. I will agree with some of council members' comments to change that program, and that if someone, landlord is inspected and it's a good inspection, to stretch out the time frame to the next one. I would say you can't go past 10 years because if, again, health and safety, I don't think you're going to find any reasonable landlord that's going to have an issue with that. Smoke detectors are good for 10 years. You know, we've been changing those. Once we've installed GFCI outlets, emergency cutoff switches for furnaces, you know, the health and safety issues, what are you going to be inspecting for? Now we get into nebulous things. Recently, not even history, recently, bathtub stopper not there. Microwave vents or filters laying on the counter and not installed. You know, these were what was written up for failing the inspection. So again, the home ownership, I have no problem with home ownership. Hagerstown has to succeed or I will not as an investor, because my rates are staying low, because, you know, someone just showed me what some of the national averages were for rent, and we're way below that. Home ownership, agree with it. you need to make it easier for people to do that. And when I say that, we have a lot of old duplexes, road houses, or what they call railway flats from the old days, are not easily and financially capable of being separated and sold as single families. That needs to be addressed some way that keeps the safety issue in place, but allows that to occur if you want home ownership. 62, 68, depending on who you're talking to, is percentage of non-owner occupied homes. They're here. How do we work together as a group to make things go forward? I also agree, take a ride around. And when you're looking, look at some of these problem properties. They're owner-occupied properties. Again, I deal in all areas of the city, can show you where owner-occupied properties are a problem for my properties. Not beating up on them, but it goes both ways. The code in which that we use to inspect by is for all properties in the city. If you're going to enforce it, please enforce it evenly. That's all I have. Thank you. Oh, I do have one other thing. Talking about inspections, probably 6 of the inspections that have not been turned over or since the initiation of the program are mine. Tenant's been there from 49 years down to 24 years. 2 of those are Section 8 units, so they have been inspected annually. There are 943 Section 8 vouchers in the city of Hagerstown. So add that, that's 10% right there. Where did that 10% come in on never being inspected or turnover inspections? So thank you.
Thank you.
Now, as far as the sign-up sheet goes, that's it. You have signed up prior and tonight. Yeah, and it's.
Yeah, that's, you got it.
Now, if you wish to, please step up to the microphone. I'll give you the opportunity now. Give us your name and address.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Virginia Magruder, and I'll just say I live in the south end of town. I've talked with Kathy Meyer, and she knows where I am. Today, I'm here to urge you to include nonprofit housing, including senior housing, in with rental inspection. I spent almost 21 years in Hagerstown as an apartment dweller and almost 25 as a homeowner with rentals around me with some not pleasant experiences. For example, a rental I was in, part of a ceiling fell as it did in a rental next to the house I owned. 8 years ago, I went into senior housing paying $115,066 for the privilege of living there and a monthly maintenance fee, which has now become $736 a month. Ones with garages pay more. Ads promise no more shoveling snow, raking leaves, mowing grass, or getting up on a ladder to clean gutters or change light bulbs. I am doing all but mowing. It has been a battle getting things fixed. I reported a water stain on my ceiling and waited 3 days for maintenance, no show. I dragged my washer and dryer under the attic entry, put a step stool on them, stacked books on top of it, hoisted myself into the attic, and walked the rafters to the gable end, where I found a hole almost the size of a softball in the roof sheeting. I put pictures in a letter to the maintenance director and his boss. Plus, I found the dryer and range hood ducts had dropped below the roof sheeting, allowing rainwater in on the insulation. Lint was collected around the top of the dryer duct. Plastic sheeting around the bottom of the range hood duct did not prevent water from coming down on my glass top range, electric range, and down the wall behind the range. The range hood had no damper. This allowed insulation to fall on my range top when the fan was on. The freezer didn't freeze things, the refrigerator froze things. It took 2 hours or more to do a large wash due to the water spigot being frozen at a low level. Door and window screens had holes. The dryer was slow drying. Weather stripping did not uniformly touch exterior and storm doors due to age deterioration and or being jimmied to gain entry. Gaps existed between the wall and baseboards under sills. Black and brown water dripped from between from the window frame and its top molding. 2 blocks of sidewalk were in poor condition and dropped below the bottom of an abutting block due to a downspout dumping water between the wall and an outside closet. Lower cabinet doors were scarred by a previous tenant with a walker. Caulking was missing around the outside of windows and doors. Gutters overflow on the ground, washing mulch and dirt onto the walk because they have not been cleaned in a timely and appropriate manner. Standing on the ground after 2 or 3 days of rain, holding a leaf blower with a hose attached to it, is not going to get rid of grit, leaves, wings, and branches in a jam at a drain pipe or a bracket. This past December, when I got up on a ladder to check the gutters, I found a piece of rotten roof sheeting had slid from under the shingles. The branches of a maple tree planted too close to my unit drag on the roof. It is a battle each year getting it trimmed because it's not trimmed up sufficiently. I put in a request in February when we had the ice storm. May 1st, the maintenance director said he did not get the request. It is still not trimmed. Some get things done, some don't. When I had first encountered issues, I wrote letters to the maintenance director with a copy to his director and that director's boss. With no response from the last one cited, I contacted the Attorney General's office. I was told it could do nothing as it's not a landlord-tenant issue. I got no help from the local Commission on Aging. A code enforcement employee said he would have to ask his boss. I got no answer. The Maryland Department of Aging supposedly only has oversight over nursing homes and assisted living, but says it will speak to the ones in charge. To live here, I had to sign a paper whereby I could not have a lawyer for any dispute. I have to file a formal complaint, meet with the director, and if we couldn't reach an agreement, it would go to mediation. I would have to pay. The director does not have to accept the mediator's decision. Where can one go to get help? In addition, I or my estate is supposed to be refunded 5% per year up to 10 years of the occupancy fee when my unit is sold. I was given the impression there was a waiting list, but over time I found there was none. 10 units were empty at one point. Several deals were made to fill the units. This has caused a holdup in the settlement of estates. I have fixed some things at my expense and my labor. Housing affects the quality of living. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Can you what? Yeah. All right, anyone else who wishes to speak who didn't sign up or at least didn't sign up to testify? Go right ahead.
I signed up, but I'm apologizing in advance. I hate public speaking. I do. I'm new to Hagerstown. I'm from Cleveland. Mike is my landlord. I've been living in this region for about 3-4 years now. And when I moved here, my first thing was the sticker shock of this area. In Cleveland, you can live like a king for what you pay for prices here. So I moved to Frederick, because that's where my job was, and my rent was like $1,000 a month. All I had was one room and, you know, a one-bedroom apartment, no patio, no nothing, just brick walls. And so I asked the long term if I could move in with him all the way out in Woodbridge, Virginia, just so I could save my money and find someplace reasonable to live. Did that for a year, commuted in that heavy traffic, and talked to people. Where can I live that's reasonable? Where can I live that's safe? That's one of my biggest things for me, is because I'm single, I'm here by myself, and I can't even have my dog, which was a little great guard dog, this big, but he made enough noise to let you know somebody was coming. So I needed to be safe. And everybody, it was 2 things I heard about Hagerstown, is be careful where you live, and there was a lot of drug activity. Be careful. So I came down here probably 3 times a week. I would leave Frederick, come down here, ride around the neighborhoods to see what was going on. And when I saw his unit, 2 things hit me. It was clean, the entire street. I live at 855, around here somewhere. I really rather not say. But it's very clean, and it reminded me of home. When I saw it, I just thought, wow, I feel comfortable here. So the thing I can't understand with the rule changes, and I'm new here in town, but I want to understand. This is my second time taking off work to come here. I came to the last meeting because I wanted to understand how one changing and increasing the rate will affect me, the tenant, because we know that that price will trickle down to me, the tenant. So there's that affordable housing gone because now it's going to go back up. The rent is going to go up. How good landlords such as Mike, and quite a few that I heard in here the last time and today, how good landlords, how they are being punished for the actions of those who are not following the rules, who are not in compliance. So how by punishing them with the extra inspections and me in turn by the invasion of my privacy, by me not being able to live as comfortably as I'd like because I don't know, the way I read the paperwork that was sent out said that they could come in and inspect at any time. I didn't like that idea of somebody just coming in my home. It's none of your business if I drink 4 bottles of wine a night and I leave all 4 of them sitting on the kitchen counter. That's between me and my landlord if I'm a drunk and I'm, tearing up his place. Just kidding. I don't drink. But if I did, that's my business. So I don't see how that's going to change anything. I don't see how I don't see how these changes will all of a sudden encourage those people who are not complying to suddenly comply. Someone here mentioned tonight, go after them. Do not renew their licenses. Publish their names. Embarrassment is a strong encouragement to do right. And one last thing about home ownership. If you do move people like me out who finally find affordable, safe housing, what guarantee is there or what programs are there where tenants like me could possibly buy homes here? Or what guarantee that all of a sudden the home ownership rate will shoot up? Instead, now you got more vacant units. Is it going to solve that problem? I don't see how. So I just would love to know those answers before you guys make those changes as a new person to Hagerstown. I'm going out to the community around me saying, I live in Hagerstown and this is what I like about it. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Weaver. Okay, anyone else who did not sign up who wishes to speak? Name and address, please.
Good evening. I wasn't planning to do this, Mr. Mayor, ladies and gentlemen of the council. I wasn't planning to speak and I'm not good at it. But I really think the city of Hagerstown is blessed with good landlords. You're going to ruin us. I don't care if you come in my properties, don't care at all. I did get a letter 2 or 3 weeks ago about how nice my property was maintained and inspected good. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to go around and look at a property that says okay, instead of taking time to come in there and make appointments, go in and learn my tenants, take their time away from work, my time, and inspect something that is good when you got so many bad stuff around Hagerstown. It's pathetic. I invade I don't know what word one you, I and the city sent a letter to me on one of my properties years ago that the parking on my brick was done. A week took a man a week, and then I put a new sidewalk in. The place house next door is pathetic. I don't even see how you walk on that walk. It was that bad. The houses and the brick on that side's coming down, but yet you picked on me. That's unfair. If you want to come in my property, you come in. Thank you all for my time. I wasn't planning this. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
Anybody else? Okay. With that, we'll close the open discussion and have city administrator comments.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I just have a couple substantial traffic advisories I wanted to make clear. beginning tomorrow at 7 a.m., Locust Street's going to be closed between, all traffic between North Avenue and Broadway. That's the 400 block of Locust Street. The work will continue repeatedly Monday through Saturday and probably all the way through until late July. So that is a gas line replacement. So the detours will be marked for that. And also, the railroad is reconstructing the railroad crossing on North Avenue. So that Northern Avenue will be closed to all through traffic just at the railroad crossing itself, and that will be from June 26th through the 28th.
Northern Avenue.
Northern Avenue. So it'll be, the Northern Avenue will be open, but up into
to the railroad track.
up to the tracks.
So,
But that's
does you no good
June
unless you're going to the
26th
gym.
or some way around there. So those were significant enough to let everybody know about. And that's all I had, Mr.
That'll be a
Mayor.
cluster. Yeah. All right, Ms. McIntyre?
I don't have anything this evening. Thank you.
Nothing? Mr. Metzen?
Mayor, I won't please you. I know you're not a fan of us talking national politics, and I'll keep it very short because it's also state politics. And I want to give our governor some kudos. Reading the updated report, Governor Larry Hogan says Maryland will recall the 4 members of the National Guard he sent to the U.S.-Mexico border and will not deploy other resources until a federal policy of separating immigrant children from their families is rescinded. And I just want to commend our governor for his actions today. That's all.
Austin?
Nothing this evening.
Crystal?
I have 3 items. The first is, I figured that the millennial of the bunch was going to cover it anyway. MML convention was, it was good. Spent a lot of time with vendors, especially several vendors. I don't know if Rodney's still here, that specialize in splash pads. Everybody knows that I'm still fairly strong on that issue and our cultural trail. And so we also, heard from a number of speakers and attended a number of sessions. In fact, the one on opioid, which was literally standing room only, and they had to basically cut the session down from what they originally expected to do in terms of group discussion, because there was just too many elected officials from so many different jurisdictions, from small towns to big towns across the state in that room. And one of the points I made there, and I think that a number of big towns like Salisbury and Westminster agree, is the state needs to come up with a long-term care solution for this issue, and not the, and I hate to say it, and not the independent fly-by-night organizations that keep cropping up across the state, because, it was interesting to hear Salisbury basically iterate that very same sentiment in that discussion. So the second is for folks that are still here and for folks that attended the first one. I just want to make sure that they understand before they leave here this evening, or if they stop watching, that, we heard loud and clear what you said on this issue of the changes to this ordinance as it applies to rental facilities. And, your comments weren't the end. I think they were at the end of the beginning of this discussion, and I look for us to have a number of discussions on that, because my opinions on some of these matters have clearly been altered by some of the good comments that you've made, and that's just me speaking. And then the last item is an item I brought up some months ago, but now obviously has moved further along in the process. And I don't know how to frame it in a manner, certainly I'm trying to not offend anyone on this statement, but I think that, and this goes to the Winter Street School proposal, it's one thing in a person's mind who lives in a neighborhood, frankly, who hears that a church is going to acquire a piece of property for the activities of a church. Frankly speaking, I think it's another, and I go back to the January discussion that entity had with the Board of County Commissioners to acquire the Winter Street property. I think it's a complete different scenario, though, to an individual that hears that a church is acquiring a piece of property, with the understanding that there are at least a number of local social service and addictions-oriented entities that want to provide that as a service within, you know, the construct of that proposed use, and its impact that type of activity has on that neighborhood. And I only say that to the degree that I said in January. You know, I think that you know, if the county is working with partners to you know, facilitate and encourage that type of movement along, you know, I think that it behooves the city to have an opinion on matters such as that that we're sort of largely outside of. But you know, if it goes in the manner that was initially proposed, and it's much broader than our simple understanding in our minds of you know, Sunday church activities, you know exactly where that finger is going to be laid 2 years down the road when we have instances like we have with, you know, that we hear comments from the convenience center up the street, or the laundromat gentlemen, owners that have come in. And so that's my 2 cents on that. That's it.
Just to thank everyone that's here tonight to have the discussion with the landlords and the proposed changes. I was happy to see that emotions were down this evening compared to the last time. I think it was frustrating for all of us because we have recognized that these changes aren't exactly what we wanted. So we wanted to reach out to the people that it affects and get your opinions and try to develop a better stance going forward. And I felt like last time it was just attack the city while we were attempting to gather opinions so we could make appropriate changes. So I appreciate that this one went a little more smoothly, and we certainly are going to take into considerations all of the opinions that we heard and try to come up with a way to move forward that doesn't penalize the good landlords, because I think I can speak on behalf of all of us and say that's absolutely not our intention. We want to have good landlords, and we don't want to penalize them and make it feel like it's harder to do business here. So I appreciate everyone who took time out of their day to come. It means a lot. And MML, the millennial, was going to talk about it. I thought it was pretty cool. We attended this speech about the different age groups, and here we have 2 baby boomers, 2 Gen X, and 1 millennial. So they asked, is your elected body PMS, pale, male, and stale? And I can say we are pale, but we are not male and stale. So we have some good things going for us here. And Shelley and I actually got to spend some time with elected officials from Frederick. And we joked that it was the almighty Oz of Frederick, because all we ever hear is, be more like Frederick, be more like Frederick. And it was entertaining to us to find out that Frederick gets tired of hearing, be more like Montgomery County. And they actually said they were envious of the improvements that we are making to our downtown. And while they recognize their downtown is significantly more developed at this time, they feel like the investment we've made into the cultural trail and into art and into the park, and now what's happening with the urban improvement project, is going to put Hagerstown at an advantage over Frederick. So I thought that was important to share, because if you look at the stories, you know, we constantly get emails, why don't you do what Frederick did? And here the Frederick elected officials are saying, go Hagerstown, you guys are rocking it. So it was a good conversation to have.
Good.
Cool. I don't have anything. We're adjourned.